Every single thing about your body is a message. The length of your femur, the width of your shoulders, the number on the measuring tape you've been staring at your whole life. None of it is random. None of it is accident. It is a biological transmission sent forward through thousands of years of human survival, encoded into your genome by ancestors who never knew your name, but shaped every inch of your frame. Your height isn't just genetics in the casual sense people mean when they say you got your father's nose. It is a compressed archive of ancient migration, climate adaptation, and survival pressure stretching back to before agriculture existed, before cities, before written language. Back to when the difference between your bloodline continuing or ending came down to how efficiently your body could handle a famine, a cold snap, or a 1,000-mile migration across open steppe. Modern DNA research has cracked open something most people never consider. The height ranges we casually sort ourselves into at the doctor's office map, almost directly onto the major ancestral population groups that built the human world: Neolithic farmers, Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, steppe pastoralists, Mediterranean traders. Each group left a distinct physical signature in their descendants, and that signature is still readable in you, right now. 8 height groups, 8 ancient bloodlines. Your number isn't a lottery result, it's a document. You have probably heard the word short used as a quiet apology your entire life, a softening, a consolation. But biologically, a frame under 5'2" is not a consolation prize. It is the physical signature of one of the most successful survival strategies in all of human history, and the ancestors who built it did not survive by accident. Cast your mind back roughly 10,000 years. Agriculture is just beginning to spread across Europe and the Middle East. For the first time in human history, populations are settling, storing food, and depending on harvests they cannot fully control. And harvests fail, droughts come, winters stretch longer than expected. Entire communities collapse when the caloric supply disappears for a season. In those moments, the body that required the least energy to keep running had a direct survival edge. Not the strongest body, not the most imposing one, the most efficient one. Smaller frames carry lower basal metabolic rates, meaning the baseline calorie cost of simply existing is reduced. When food disappeared for weeks or months, a compact body could keep its organs functioning, its immune system operational, and its mind sharp on resources that would have left a larger frame in crisis. This is not a reframe. This is the evolutionary record. The populations that developed and maintained the smallest average heights, concentrated across parts of Southeast Asia, Equatorial Africa, and early agricultural Europe, did so because compactness was repeatedly selected for under pressure. Your frame is not a limitation inherited from the past. It is proof that your ancestors survived every single one of those pressures. Every famine, every failed harvest, every brutal winter. They made it through. And they wrote the evidence directly into your height. Something shifted in Europe around 7,000 years ago. A wave of farmers moving northwest out of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, began replacing and absorbing the hunter-gatherer populations who had lived there for tens of thousands of years. They brought wheat, they brought cattle, they brought a completely different relationship with the land, and they brought a body type that their new lifestyle had already spent generations optimizing. Neolithic farmers were shorter than the hunter-gatherers they displaced. The archaeological record is consistent on this point. Skeletal remains from early agricultural sites across Europe show a measurable reduction in average height compared to the Mesolithic populations that preceded them. The reason is not mystery. It is nutrition and mechanical demand running in the same direction at the same time. Agricultural diets were calorically reliable but nutritionally narrower than the varied diet of a hunter-gatherer. Less diverse protein, less animal fat, more dependence on a small number of starchy crops. That nutritional profile shaped growth patterns over generations, selecting for frames that could reach full physical capability on a more limited dietary input. Mechanically, farming rewarded a different body than hunting did. Sustained, repetitive, ground-level labor. Planting, harvesting, grinding grain, tending livestock. A compact, dense, low center of gravity frame handled those demands efficiently across a full working life without breaking down. If your height sits between 5'2" and 5'5", the physical blueprint you carry traces directly back to those first European farmers. Steady, durable, built Not for a single explosive moment, but for a lifetime of productive work. That is not a small inheritance. That is the foundation civilization was literally built on. Not every ancestral signal is a straight line. Some of them are intersections. And if your height lands between 5'6" and 5'7", your genome is most likely telling you that your ancestors lived at one of the great human crossroads, the Mediterranean basin, where migration routes, trade networks, and gene pools collided for thousands of years and never fully separated. The Mediterranean was not a barrier. It was a highway. Phoenician traders moving west along the northern African coast, Greek colonists spreading across the Aegean and into southern Europe, North African populations pushing across the narrow straits into Iberia, Levantine farmers already carrying Anatolian ancestry mixed with earlier Middle Eastern lineages. For millennia, this basin was the most genetically active zone on the planet, and the bodies it produced reflected that complexity. Height in Mediterranean populations historically clustered in a middle range, taller than the compact Neolithic farmer baseline, shorter than the northern and eastern groups we will meet later. That middle positioning was not coincidence. It was the biological average of multiple ancestral streams meeting, mixing, and stabilizing across dozens of generations. What that mixing produced was something geneticists now recognize as a convergence signature. Not one dominant ancestral group stamped onto the genome, but several contributing in rough proportion. Anatolian farmer, Levantine, North African, early European hunter-gatherer, each leaving a partial imprint, none fully overriding the others. Your height in this range is a record of movement, of contact, of a world that was already more connected than most people imagine when they picture ancient history. Your ancestors were not isolated. They were at the center of everything. Around 5,000 years ago, something dramatic happened to the genetic makeup of Europe. A population exploded outward from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, the vast grasslands stretching north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea across what is now Ukraine, Russia, and Kazakhstan. They were called the Yamnaya. They had domesticated the horse, they had the wheel, and they moved with a speed and scale that reshaped the continent's DNA within just a few centuries. The Yamnaya were tall. Skeletal evidence from burial mounds called kurgans, scattered across the steppe in their thousands, shows a population with notably long limbs and robust frames. They were pastoralists, meaning their diet was heavily animal-based, high protein, high fat, nutritionally rich in exactly the ways that drive skeletal growth. Their bodies reflected generations of that dietary abundance, combined with the physical demands of a mobile, horse-riding, cattle-herding existence. When they moved into Europe, they did not simply trade with the farming populations already there. In many regions, particularly northern and central Europe, the genetic data shows near-complete population replacement within a few generations. The Yamnaya ancestry did not blend quietly into the background. It dominated. If your height sits between 5'8" and 5'9", you are likely carrying a significant Yamnaya inheritance. That extra inch or two above the Neolithic farmer baseline is not random. It is the measurable physical echo of a steppe migration that happened 300 generations ago, still visible in your frame today. Your ancestors did not wait for the world to come to them. They rode out to meet it. Europe after the Yamnaya migration was not a clean replacement. It was a collision. Three major ancestral streams: the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who had lived there since the ice retreated, the Neolithic farmers who arrived from Anatolia, and the Yamnaya pastoralists thundering in from the east, all occupying the same continent within a few thousand years of each other. In most of Europe, none of them fully won. They blended. The genetic signature that emerged from that three-way mixture is what researchers now identify as the ancestral baseline for most modern Northern and Central Europeans. And the height that mixture produces, when all three streams contribute in roughly balanced proportion, lands consistently between 5'10" and 5'11". This is not the compact efficiency of the pure farmer lineage. It is not the towering steppe pastoralist frame either. It is the biological midpoint of three very different survival strategies, meeting across centuries of contact and producing something stable, versatile, and durable. The hunter-gatherer's lean mobility, the farmer's metabolic efficiency, the pastoralist's skeletal robustness, all three present, none fully dominant. What makes this height range genetically interesting is precisely that balance. Ancient DNA studies consistently show that individuals in this range tend to carry detectable proportions of all three major European ancestral components rather than a heavy tilt toward any single one. Your height is not a compromise, it is an integration. A genome that drew from every major survival toolkit the ancient world produced and assembled them into a single functional frame. 3 bloodlines, 1 body. That is not average, that is complete. Before I show you the last part, if you've ever looked at your own results and wondered where your height fits into your bloodline, I put it all together in a guide called Where Do You Really Come From? Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what comes next is the part most people completely miss. The further north you move across the European continent, the longer the winters get, the shorter the growing seasons, the narrower the window between a successful harvest and a catastrophic one. And the human body, given enough generations under those conditions, responds in ways that are measurable, predictable, and still visible in the descendants of those populations today. Scandinavian and Germanic populations developed some of the tallest average heights in the ancient world, and the reasons stack on top of each other in a way that makes the outcome almost inevitable. Diet first. Northern European populations retained heavier dependence on animal protein long after southern populations had shifted toward grain-dominant agriculture. Fish, game, dairy, the nutritional profile that drives skeletal development most aggressively. Generation after generation of that dietary pattern selects for taller frames. Thermoregulation second. In cold climates, a larger body retains heat more effectively. Physics is straightforward here. Bigger volume relative to surface area means less heat lost per unit of body mass. Populations living through long Scandinavian winters were under genuine selective pressure to develop frames that could maintain core temperature without burning through energy reserves too quickly. Height and body mass were part of that solution. If your height sits between 6'0" and 6'1", the Northern European ancestral signal is almost certainly a dominant thread in your genome. The Viking skeletal record, archaeological sites across Scandinavia and into the British Isles, consistently shows average male heights clustering in exactly this range. Your ancestors did not just survive the North, they were built by it. Before the farmers arrived, Europe belonged to a different kind of human. Leaner, more mobile, operating across vast territories on foot, tracking game across landscapes that had no fields, no granaries, no permanent settlements. The Western hunter-gatherers, as geneticists now call them, had lived across Europe since the Ice Age retreated roughly 12,000 years ago, and the bodies they developed over those millennia were built for something the farmers who replaced them never needed to be. Speed over distance. Skeletal remains from Western hunter-gatherer sites consistently show tall, gracile frames, long legs relative to torso length, lean muscle distribution optimized for endurance movement, rather than the repetitive ground-level labor of agriculture. These were not the compact, dense builds of the Neolithic farmer. They were long-limbed, efficient striders, built to cover ground. The nutritional base that produced those frames was diverse and protein-rich. Wild game, fish, foraged plants across a broad seasonal range. That variety drove robust skeletal development in ways that the narrower agricultural diet simply could not replicate, which is part of why average heights actually dropped when farming replaced hunting across much of Europe. If your height lands between 6'2" and 6'3", you are carrying a strong Western hunter-gatherer echo in your genome. Ancient DNA research consistently finds elevated hunter-gatherer ancestry in individuals from the taller ranges of Northern and Western European populations. That lineage was largely displaced by farmers thousands of years ago, but it never disappeared entirely. It survived. In some genomes more than others. Because while the average Yamnaya migrant left a height signature in the 5'8" to 5'9" range when blended with existing European populations, the core Yamnaya lineage itself, the least diluted expression of that steppe ancestry, produced something considerably taller. And if your height sits between 6'4" and 6'5", that undiluted pastoralist inheritance is almost certainly a dominant force in your genome. The pure Yamnaya skeletal profile was exceptional by ancient standards. Archaeological analysis of Kurgan burial sites across the Pontic steppe shows average male heights consistently reaching into the 6'3" to 6'5" range. That was not typical for any ancient population anywhere on the planet at that time. It was an outlier. And it was produced by a very specific combination of factors that the steppe environment created and sustained across thousands of years. Protein abundance was the foundation. A pastoral economy centered on cattle, sheep, and horses meant consistent access to high-quality animal protein and fat throughout the year. No failed harvests. No seasonal nutritional collapse. Just a steady, rich dietary input across every generation that drove skeletal growth to its upper limits under ancient conditions. Physical demand added the second layer. Riding, herding, and the physical requirements of a mobile warrior culture selected for frames capable of generating and absorbing serious force across a lifetime of demanding use. Your height is not an anomaly. It is the least diluted version of the most physically dominant ancestral population that ever crossed into Europe. That signal does not weaken across 300 generations. It just waits to be read. Every ancestral pattern discussed so far has a population behind it. A migration, a climate, a dietary shift that played out across centuries and left a measurable imprint on the genomes of its descendants. But at 6'6" to 6'8", the story stops being primarily about population history and starts being about something more specific: individual genetic architecture. The rare variants that sit inside a genome and push expression far beyond what any ancestral group alone would predict. Height is not controlled by one gene. Current research has identified thousands of genetic variants that each contribute small individual effects to final stature. In most people, those variants average out. Some push up, some push down. The result lands somewhere in the middle of what the ancestral background would suggest. But occasionally, a genome assembles an unusual concentration of growth-promoting variants across multiple pathways simultaneously, and the result is a frame that sits well outside anything the population average would explain. The IGF-1 axis is the most studied of these pathways. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is a hormone that drives skeletal and tissue growth during development. Certain rare variants in the genes that regulate IGF-1 production and sensitivity can significantly amplify growth outcomes, pushing final height well beyond what nutrition and ancestry alone would generate. These variants exist in every major population, but cluster at meaningful frequency only in a small percentage of individuals. What this means is that your height in this range is not simply a louder version of the pastoralist signal. It is a genetic combination that required specific rare pieces to fall into alignment across generations of inheritance. Your ancestors did not just carry the right bloodline, they carried the right blueprint inside it. There is a point where human biology stops optimizing and starts experimenting, where the genome pushes past every population average, past every ancestral template, past every dietary and climatic pressure that shaped our species across millennia, and produces something the evolutionary record has no clean category for. At 6'9" and above, you are not simply the tallest expression of a known ancestral lineage. You are a data point at the outer boundary of what the human growth system can produce. The historical record of extreme height is sparse but consistent. Accounts of unusually tall individuals appear across ancient sources from Egypt, Greece, Rome, and the medieval Islamic world. In nearly every case, the individuals described were treated as singular, not as representatives of a population pattern, but as exceptions the population itself could not fully explain. Modern genetics has begun to clarify why. Extreme height at this range almost always involves a convergence of rare high-effect variants across multiple independent growth pathways, firing simultaneously in a single genome. It is not one unusual gene. It is several unusual genes, aligning in the same person. The biological ceiling becomes visible here. The cardiovascular system is working at the upper limit of what human heart architecture was designed to sustain. The skeletal frame is absorbing compressive forces that accumulate faster than repair systems can comfortably offset. Growth hormone dysregulation, when present, carries its own long-term metabolic consequences. And yet these frames have appeared in every era, on every continent, across every ancestral background. Evolution keeps running the experiment. It keeps producing the outlier, not because it is optimizing for something specific, but because genetic systems occasionally combine in ways that push past every known boundary. You are not a mistake the genome made. You are a test it keeps running. 8 height ranges. 8 ancient stories. All of them written into the same place you have been looking at your whole life without knowing what you were reading. The number on the measuring tape was never just a number. It was a compressed signal from people who lived and died thousands of years before you were born. People who survived famines and migrations and ice ages and continental collisions between entire populations. People whose bodies were shaped by grasslands and coastlines and frozen northern winters and protein-rich steppe diets. Every one of those pressures left a mark. And the mark is still there, in your femur length, in your skeletal proportions, in the specific combination of ancient bloodlines that assembled into the person standing in front of the mirror right now. This is what modern ancient DNA research has quietly confirmed over the last 2 decades. Height is not random inheritance. It is a readable document. Neolithic farmer, Mesolithic hunter-gatherer, Yamnaya pastoralist, Mediterranean trader. Each one contributed something to the human height spectrum we navigate today, and each one left enough of a signature that the connection between your frame and your ancestry is not metaphor. It is measurable. You have been carrying this information your entire life. Now you know how to read it. If you want to go further and find exactly where your own height signature shows up inside your actual DNA results, the next video shows you how.